Yo, what is good, dev guys? It's your boy Cant. Yes, sir. I'm back with another tutorial video. In this one, I want to show you guys how to get started using the Enhanced Input plugin that's available in Unreal Engine 5. It's also available in Unreal Engine 4.26, so if you want to follow along using that version of the engine, you can. Just to give you a brief overview of how this system works, not to go into too much detail. Basically, these input actions pass through a value to your input component system. It doesn't pass through a key. These actions don't these actions are key agnostic. They don't care about what key sends the value. They just pass the value. That's it. And the other part of this system is mapping context. This is where you set the input action to have a key, which you could add. You can add triggers to it, which I'll show you more about when we get to the C++ code. And you can add modifiers. One that we'll use is called negate, which I'll explain when we get there. But basically, how this works is these mapping contexts are basically giving your input component a state. And when we were using the old input system, it didn't have a state. You had to manually create a state for your input. So that means if your character had a state where he was opening up a backpack or a state where he was shooting a gun, you need to have an enum that tracked those states. And whenever you activated those things, you had to switch. You had to set that enum to that state, and then on your input that has multiple input, you could do multiple things with the input, you'll have to switch off of that state. And it becomes cumbersome because a game could have 20 states. So in your C++ code or in your blueprint, you'll have a switch statement with 20 damn different things on it on what to do differently when you're in a certain state with the input for the one input. But with this, you can easily just set a new mapping context as a higher priority over the initial one, and then whatever inputs that has in it, it will override and take precedence over the initial mapping context. Excuse me. Like I didn't write this down. I'm thinking of this all off the top, baby. You feel me? You know how we get down, baby. Raw, undone. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, let's get back in here. But yeah, that's basically how it works. This allows for a lot more flexibility when it comes to input. You can dynamically change input mappings on the fly at runtime. It makes it easier to create a custom input mapping UI. And I will do a tutorial on that once I get mine set up. So be on the lookout for that. That's one of the next things I have planned. But we're going to get started. Open up Unreal Engine 5. Start a new first-person template project. And make sure you are in C++ because I will be showing you guys how to do this in C++ and not Blueprint. I'm sorry. I prefer C++ for things sometimes, especially things like this that can get kind of stringy inside the Blueprint window. So if you have a problem with C++, you don't know how to use it, I suggest you learn a little bit about it, man. Just learn a little bit. You just start playing with it. Once you start understanding it, it's a lot better way to use Unreal Engine with both C++ and Blueprint. So what we're going to do first, the first thing you need to do is go into Edit, Plugins, and you need to type in Enhanced Input, and you need to enable this plugin and then restart the editor, which I'll do. Oh, this is going to disconnect me. Is it going to disconnect me? No, it's not. Okay, so now that we got that and we restarted the editor, we need to go to Project Settings, go down to our Input, and we need to switch our default classes from Player Input to Enhanced Player Input, and the input component to the enhanced input component. This will just make sure when you override the setup player input component function that's called in your character or your controller, you'll use this enhanced input component instead. So with that being said, we need to go ahead and just create our action mappings. I like to be organized, so I create a dev folder, and then I put the input folder in there, and then I got a folder for actions in there, and I got a folder for mappings in there. So in my actions folder, I'm going to right click, go to input, and I'm going to create an input action. And this naming convention ain't out there yet, so I just want to say I'm the OG of this. For input action, we're going to do IA. I know it's not that creative. I ain't doing nothing spectacular, but it's not out there yet. So IA, and we want to create an action for the jump. And you're wondering where I'm getting this from. So in the project settings, there's already mapping set up for this. And what we're going to do, just to give you an idea on how to work with the system, is to just remake all of these actions except for this reset BR shit. I don't care about that. But so we're going to make an action for jump, for fire. We're going to make an action for moving, which can include both move right and move forward. And we're going to make an action for looking and turning, which could include both the pitch and the yaw, or the turn and the look inside of one action. So we need 4 actions. And if I press Control Space, I can just duplicate this, call this my movement. This will be my move right and my move forward. Control W on that to duplicate it and make one for looking. This will be my pitch and yaw, my look and turn. Make one more, and we're going to do fire. And this is where we will fire the weapon. Now, the way these input actions work is all they do is send a value, and we just need to set up the value that it's going to send. So for a thing like a fire, which is a trigger, a bool is fine. When we press, it'll be true, and when we not pressed, it'll be false. So that's fine. But this will also work for jump, as well as any other input action that has a toggle on or a toggle off. All you need to send through is a bool. But for looking, we need to send through a vector 2D, because we're going to be dealing with float values that are coinciding with the axes. So, you know, X and Y, X is to move left and right, Y is to move up and down. So these will be used to move left and right and forward and backwards. So for looking, we need that for the mouse input when it's looking left and right and forward and back, or up and down. And for the movement, we also need to pass in a vector 2D, even though this will be a little bit different when we set it up in the mapping context. And I'll show you that when we get to that step. So we need to pass in a vector 2D here as well to get this information from it. The next thing we're going to create is our first mapping context, and we're just going to call this our base mapping context. And I guess I could let's make another convention. Let's call it MC, you know what I'm saying? MC, master of ceremony. No, mapping context base. So yeah, we got two. We got 1 mapping context, and we got 4 actions, and we got our values set up that they'll pass through. So right now, you can either close the editor or you can just minimize it. We don't really need it right now, but just to save you some CPU, and I like to run Unreal Engine through here, so errors pop up. Like if I crash, the error will pop up here. It's easier to read instead of that little window with the fucking small text in it. So go ahead and do what you do. You can minimize, or you could close and follow me. I'm using Rider, so a lot of these shortcuts I'll be using will be Rider specific. So you have to connect those shortcuts to whatever IDE you're using. I suggest you invest that into that Rider, baby. It's real. I got a video on why that's clutch. So what we need to do here is these 3 steps. So the first step, before you even open up your character class or your CPP, you need to go into the Build.CS for the project. You need to include this enhanced input string here inside your public dependency modules, and you need to build the project. That'll take like 45 seconds, maybe a minute, depending on what you got. It's got to build all of these classes. And also, just a hint: if you're using Rider for the and it tells you to install to engine or to game, install it to the game. I should have said that first. Install it to the game, because with Unreal Engine 5, there is a connection issue between Rider and Unreal Engine 5 source code right now. So just install it to the game, and it'll make things a lot easier for you. You won't have any compile errors. So yeah, the first step you need to do is include this string here. Go ahead and close that. We don't need it anymore. The next step after you've compiled is you want to forward declare these two classes. The input action class, which is a UData asset that holds, which is basically what that input action that we created inside the editor was. And you need to create a mapping context. Forward declare the mapping context, which is another UData asset, which is very lightweight, which is another class that we already created, but we just need to connect these two from C++ to the editor or blueprint. So we need to forward declare them here. And then I created a section using my world famous live template, #reach, which creates a region for me where I just type in whatever the region name is. I get to, type in stuff like that. I created a region for input where I'm going to hold all the input things that we're going to use for this tutorial. So first thing I did was create the input actions. You have to create the input actions here and create a pointer to them, because we're going to point to them inside a blueprint. We're going to basically plug these inside a blueprint so that, like I said, blueprint and C++ connects with each other. So you want to create a U property that's edit defaults only, blueprint read and write. And I put this in the category of a main folder and a subfolder. You don't have to do this. You can just make it whatever you want, but this just allows for more organization inside of the editor. So the first action I made was a pointer to the movement action. I made a pointer to the look action. I made a pointer to the jump action, and I made a pointer to the fire action, right? So we got those all set up. And the next thing you want to do is make a pointer to your input mapping context, which is my base mapping context. And I put this in a folder called input mappings in my controls folder. Make sure it's edit defaults only, blueprint read write, and keep that the same. We also want to create this variable right here. You don't have to do this. You can also plug in a magic number for the function that this is used in. But I like to have everything editable inside of the editor, so I don't have to keep going back and forth. You know what I mean? So here, make it edit default only, blueprint read write, put it in that same folder or wherever you want, and make an int32 and call it base mapping priority. Set it to 0 for now, since we only have one mapping context. I'll show you why the priority is an important index when we get to that step. And the next thing I did was create my custom functions for my movement input and my look input. Now, where I got this from, I didn't just find this out of nowhere. The documentation is here. It's not as clear as you would like, you know what I mean? But you can kind of get the gist of what it's saying. So for some inputs, especially ones where you need to get the value out of the input action struct, you gotta create a function that takes in that value and passes it by reference. So what we did was do the same thing. This is basically the same logic here. We just made a void enhance move that takes in a const f input action value, and we named it value. Now this will be red. I don't know why, but I'm guessing Rider hasn't indexed this plugin yet. So this is not something that you can press Alt Enter and do the quick shortcut. So what you do is just type this in and then Control click it, and it'll show you the header file. So you need to include that header file. Just go up to the top and include, where did I put it? In my includes, include, hashtag include input action value.h. And that will get rid of the error on this right here. So sorry about that. This is still an experimental plugin, so it hasn't been indexed by the Rider team yet. But yeah, now that we got all those set up, we're pretty much ready to start with the code here and getting everything converted over to the enhanced input plugin. So I'm gonna go to this function where I've already typed it out, and I will type this one with you guys so you can see how I did it. But if you go to the initial, so if I press Control F, move forward, and I want to go to their, this is the one that Unreal Engine created for you inside of the template. It says if this value that's coming through here is not equal to 0, we want to add movement input connected to that value. So it is the same thing inside of our custom function here, except this value, it doesn't spit out a float. So in order to do that same logic to see if the value, the float value of this is not equal to 0, you have to get the magnitude of this value. And this value is dynamic. It depends on whatever action you're using. So if I go to this class here, it's dynamic. So if I'm using axis 1D, it'll spit out a float value. If I'm using axis 2D, it'll spit out a f vector 2D, which is a struct. And if I spit out, if I put in axis 3D inside that input action that we created inside of the editor, it'll spit out an f vector. And this basically is all the logic where it's helping you get the value that is passed through. So right here, this is an array. This axis 2D is an array, not an array. It's a struct. Well, I think no, f vectors are structs. Okay, so never mind me trying to figure out C++ right here. But basically, this axis returns a value, and this value is the x axis and the y axis. Now, getting the value is a little bit confusing, and I couldn't find the code to where it shows you using the index. Oh, right here. Read only base value accessor, doesn't care about the type, expect 0 when accessing unused components. So the float operator, it takes in index and it returns the value at that index that you plugged in. So for example, if I'm using an f vector 2D, it'll take the float value and create an array. It'll create a float operator array, which takes in the index, and then it returns that value, which is an array at the index. So for the f vector 2D, the array would be the x-axis and the y-axis. So x would be 0, y would be 1 at the index. And that's how we get to this this logic here. So we got the magnitude of the value, which is just the magnitude of whatever value is passed in, if it's 1 or -1. And then we want to get the exact value for the axis that we want to use. So if we're moving forward, the axis that we want to use is the y-axis. So we need to plug in the 1 because remember, this index coincides with the axis index. So remember I told you that 0 is the x-axis and 1 is the y-axis. So we have to plug in 1 to get that value here, to get the y-axis value. Same thing with if we want to move right, we need to plug in 0 to get the x value of the x-axis. And so that's how this pretty much works. You see, I only made one function. I didn't have to make a move right function and a move forward function and do that. You could do that, but you have to make a separate action for move right, a separate action for move forward. But we can just put all of our movement in one action and have all the inputs that we would use to move inside that one inside that mapping context. And it might sound confusing now, but I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about when we set up the mapping context inside of the Unreal Engine editor. So for this enhanced look, let me show you guys how I got to this point, how I figured this out. So inside of here, there is a function called look. So we can, and basically what this does, it adds controller pitch input. And for the turn, it adds controller yaw input. If we go to the lookup rate, this adds controller pitch input, and it does it to where the controller is not blazing fast. We're going to take this function and put it inside of our custom call over here, inside of our enhanced look. So all we want to do is add controller pitch input, and the value, if you look in here, it just takes in the value. So the value that we want to put in is the struct. So the value at the index 1, because we want the y-axis for up and down for the pitch. And we also need to go ahead and multiply this by -1, because the initial pitch, if you look up, it'll pitch you down, and if you look down, it'll pitch you up. That's how pitch works. So we need to invert it for the regular control, and that's that. And for the turn, we just need to add controller yaw input and pass in the value of x, which is 0 index, and we don't need to multiply that by anything. Now normally, like if I go to my own code here, if I go to my look, where is it? My look, I check if my character is alive, and I add the controller yaw input, and I multiply it times the sensitivity, which is the value that could be set in a UI. Like if if your player wants a different sensitivity, you would multiply it times the sensitivity, then times the delta times seconds. So for this, we're not going to do that. We're not going to create any new fields. We're just trying to get it working how it works already inside of the template. So we got our look function set up. We got our enhanced movement function set up. Next thing we need to do is we need to override this function here and change what we got going on here, because we're using this bind action. We're using the old system here. With the new system, if I go to documentation, here we're using we want to make sure we got a valid make sure we're using the right enhanced input component. Make sure we're using that, and this is so that the editor doesn't crash if you forgot to put the if you forgot to go to the input settings and set the default classes to this enhanced input class. So basically we check it, see if we got our action pointed. If we have plugged in our action, then we want to bind the action to whatever trigger event we decide on, and we find this is the world object context that we'll find this function on right here. So this is the function that you want to call whenever you trigger this action. Okay, so I'm gonna just copy this and then edit it to my liking, right? So go back to our class here inside of the CPP, and we can just go right underneath the check player input component, and press Control V and paste that code. And this is not a complete class. We need to include it. So Alt Enter and include it, or if you're not using Rider, however you find out the includes, go ahead and do that. So we're getting errors here because this input action needs to be our jump. Let's just start with the jump action, right? And then we want to copy this and we want to paste it here. And then we want to say the same thing they do right here. Same thing they do right here. Just copy it, paste it right here. This is what we want to do when we jump. And then we want to copy this because we need to bind it when it's completed. This is a different, this is an enum that has different states. So if I type in, let's just look at the enum states. So if I delete this trigger event, we got canceled, completed, none, ongoing, which means I'm holding it down currently, started, and triggered. Now, remember I said you could create triggers specific to game logic. Like if you needed to hold something down and press another button at the same time, you would set that as a trigger. And then this event will only fire when that is triggered. For start, we want to fire this event whenever we start pressing the input. Ongoing is we want to trigger this event while this input is ongoing. And completed or canceled, this is what we want to use. We want to, when this is completed, we want to stop jumping. So copy this, stop jumping, copy, and paste it here. And I'm so confident that this will work, I'm gonna delete this bind right here. And this other example is if you wanted to create a kind of like a handler function, which we don't have to do. This is a little bit more advanced. I don't know the use case for this yet, so we're just gonna skip over this, and then we're gonna copy this code, and we're just gonna modify it for each input action that we have. So we got a fire action, and we just copy this, paste it here, paste it here. And when we start pressing this action, we want to where is it? Call on fire right here. So just copy this right here, copy, and then paste it right here. And in this code, they don't have any logic to stop firing because it's only a single fire weapon. But if you had a automatic rifle, you would have it to where this calls a function that says on stop fire. So we're good with that. Fire action is done. Now we need the movement action. And well, not that. Movement action here. What the why does it keep changing at the last second? We'll just type in movement action, copy that, paste it here, paste this here. We don't need a completed for this because movement only is a Boolean. So when we start, we want to call our move function here. So we want to get a reference to, or the address of our enhance character, and we want to do enhance move. And that's all we want to do for the movement action. And then for the look action, we want to do our enhance look. So get a reference to the address of our function called enhance look and plug that in there. And we are almost ready to go. There is one more thing that we need to do, and this is in the documentation as well. So in order to bind your actions, in order to bind your mapping context to your local player, which is where this enhanced input is located on the local player, you have to call PawnClientRestart, and then you have to put this code inside of there. So I'm gonna copy this code here, and then we need to go back to our code and go back to our header file and go up here where we do the other overrides like begin play, and we need to just type in pawn client, and I already have it there, but if you type in pawn C, this function will pop up, and just go ahead and put that function there. And then you want to implement it, alt enter or alt insert, and create definitions. And then inside of this function, you want to call the super, and then you want to paste this code, and it's going to look like this, right? This will be red. You'll need to include the header file for this. Rider, it automatically includes it for you when you press Alt Enter. But if you need the include and what it is the enhanced input subsystems.h file. That's what you need to include. So going back here, basically we're going to take our subsystem and we want to clear all mappings, and then we want to add our mapping context. And this will get called, this function right here will get called when you want to say, like I said, when you have an ability active, you want to add that map context and set its priority higher than the base. So you can see here, add each mapping context along with their priority values. Higher values out prioritize the lower values. So we only have one, and we need to plug in. If you press Control Shift Space, you can see we need to plug in a mapping context pointer and the N32 priority. So we already created that in our header file with this mapping input mapping context. So copy that and get rid of this, so I gotta jump, and paste it right here. That's the value we need there. And then our priority index or priority integer is that base mapping priority. And now we're pretty much ready to go, and everything should work exactly how it was working with the prior system. So I'm gonna build just to see if we get any errors. And we're good. So I'm gonna go ahead and run the editor. And go into project settings, go to input, and we just want to delete all of these. We don't need them anymore. We got something bigger and better, you feel me? So the last and final step is actually setting up the mapping context. So the first step we did was create our actions. Of course, after enabling the plugin. So the first thing we did was create our actions. Then we created a mapping context, but we didn't do anything with it. Then we went into our code and we set up the logic for how our actions will interact with the input component and the mapping context. And we created a couple functions that basically copy what the original functions do for the other input system. And then we set that up inside of the player input component override, which is here. We set up the bindings to those functions inside of here. And now what we're about to do is add the input actions to the mapping. So go ahead and make this full screen. And then we want to add 4 mappings here. Oh shit, just added the, delete this. So add a mapping, and then we want to set this to our fire. Let's just go down the line. If you press this, you can click a button, and whatever button you click will be the mapping here. Add a new one. We need to set this to our jump, and then we want jump to be space, and then add a new, and then we want to set this to our looking action. And then for this, you want to type in mouse, and you want to type in XY 2D axis. That's the one you need for this. And then for our final one, for the movement, you want to go here and type in a few of them. So we want to type in W, we want to add S, we want to add A, and we want to add D. Now, everything, so the fire is good. We don't need to do anything with that. The jump is good. We don't need to do anything with that because these are taken in Booleans. This mouse, the looking is set up fine because we set up a 2D axis, and this already reads the correct axis of our mouse and sends that over to the input, sends that over to the function that we created that takes in the values. But for this, we need to set up some different things, and I didn't make this up. It is in the documentation. So in here with the directional input, in order to use a 1D, like a one-dimensional source, such as WASDA or the directional arrows, you can do so by applying the correct modifiers, specifically negate to make some keys register as negative, and swizzle input axis values to make some keys register as Y instead of the default X. Okay, so each key defaults at X for the keyboard. So we got to do a little bit of extra work here to get them to line up. So for the W key or the up arrow, we need our desired input interpretation is the positive Y-axis. So we need to set swizzle input values as the required input modifier. So we go here and just follow what it says. We need to set the modifier to swizzle input axes, and that is how you set up the W key to take in the positive Y. And for the S, we need to set these input modifiers. We need to set negate, and then we need to set it to the Y axis. So just follow what it says here. Add two modifiers, put one on negate, and then put one on the swizzle input axis values, and we're done with those. And for A, which is going left, we need the negative X axis. So we need to negate, because remember the default is positive X. So we need to negate the input of this key so that it goes negative X. And so for A, we need to drop down, add a modifier, and just set it to negate. And for D, since we're going right and the default is positive X, we don't need to do anything to it. So save this, and go into your project files. And a lot of you probably like, damn, we're not done yet, but we need to set up things. So you see I'm pressing keys, I'm moving my mouse, nothing's happening. It's because we haven't set up the mappings. We haven't gave the pointer to the character class. So we need to go into first person. Where's the blueprint? First person blueprint right here, and first person character. We need to open the full blueprint editor, and remember, oh man, I can't wait to learn how to use this. Remember how I said organization is key? This is my, if I go back to my code here, and I go back to my header file, this is my controls and input actions folder right here. So I got controls, I got input actions, and I got input mappings. And then so we can plug in our movement action to the movement action, our look action to the looking action, and we can plug in our jump action to the jump field here, and then our fire action to the fire field. And then we go down to the input mappings and we plug in our base input mapping context, and we can keep this at 0 since we only have one. Just press compile, and now we're ready to go. So if I press play or Alt P, you see nothing is working. Why is that? Why is that happening? Let's do some debugging. So if I go to my graph here and I type in my enhanced input, so if I type in my enhanced input action events, let's just do moving, and let's say on started, we want to print out the value. So we want to break this, and we want to print out, so let's just print string. And let's make an append here. And we want to say x-axis equals this. And then make another append. Press Shift Enter so it goes to the new line, and press y-axis equals, and then add a new pin and plug this value in. So let's see what happens. See if we get anything. So press play, and fireworks. Our axes are coming through correct, but why aren't we moving? So everything is hunky-dory, but why aren't we moving? Huh. I wonder if, let me see, C++, started, action started, this, enhance move. I wonder if I need to put this on trigger. Let me look at my code. Yeah, I put it on triggered. Okay. Oops, not that one. So instead of started, this needs to be triggered. I don't know why. Maybe there's a oh, okay, I know why. It's because there's a threshold that these hit, and then they'll trigger the it'll trigger the input value. So let me recompile here. Recompile button. Whoa, this video is long. And press play. See what we got. Yeah. So our input axis is working. We can move here. Why is the jump turning us? What the hell? Okay, let's go back. Here, enhance look, triggered, bind action, jump action. There's our problem right there. So we need to make sure this is the look action that's getting bound to this and not the jump action. I was like, why are we jumping and turning? So go ahead and recompile that. I apologize for this video being so long. I will leave timestamps so you guys can skip through and find things faster. But if we look, everything is set up right. Our value is, so what's going on there? Enhance looked. So maybe we don't need to, oh, we multiplied it by 1. We need to multiply this by -1. That's dumb. Anything multiplied by 1 is itself. So that's why our input axis was fucked up there. And hopefully that's the last recompile we need. Let's yeah, we're good. Everything works. We can shoot, we can jump. Our movement is all fine and dandy. Yes, sir. And this is not using any of the other bindings. You see, we don't have any of those bindings. This is just using this weapon mapping, this base mapping context. And yeah, that's pretty much it, man. I apologize if I stumbled over some stuff. Like you say, I like to do things true and raw. I don't like to write scripts down or anything like that. So if you have any questions that I could possibly answer, put them in the comments. Let me know if this tutorial helped you out. Let me know if you want more content like this. Like I said, I will be doing a tutorial on how to set up your own remap UI. That's going to take a little time for me to get together because I got to set up the UI. I got to set up the correct logic for remapping. So I'll probably have to break that video down into a few videos. This one should have been like 2 or 3 videos. So, but we're just gonna kick it how it is, baby. You know what I'm saying? Timestamps will be in the description. Follow me on all my social media. Those will also be in the description. Like I said, like, subscribe. I appreciate y'all for stopping by, paying attention. You feel me? Peace. I see you in the next one.